the Center on Disability and Development Affiliated Faculty Seminar Series. The series is titled Supporting Students with IDD Through the Education Experience. So a little bit more about this seminar series. Each presentation once a month will cover the impact of the IDD population as it relates to their educational experience. World-renowned Texas A&M University faculty members will be sharing their research, excuse me, knowledge and experiences related to the topic of that month. This series is an interactive 1.5-hour seminar designed to increase the knowledge and awareness for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, IDD, among faculty, staff, students, and community members at Texas A&M University and beyond. The seminar is meant to promote strong dialogue about issues and information surrounding supporting students with IDD through the educational experience, and in doing so, the CDD affiliated faculty seminar series will work to promote positive, equitable, accepting attitudes towards people with disabilities on campus, in schools, and in the community. So today's seminar series is about seeing college as a possibility for all students, transition to higher education for students with disabilities. Transition to higher education is often a goal for many students and families, yet all too many families of and students with disabilities do not see higher education as a viable possibility. In this presentation, Doctors Marcia Montague and Carly Gilson will discuss options for accessing post-secondary education for all students in Texas. Supports available as well as key resources will be identified. I'm going to pass the microphone over to Dr. Marcia Montague and to introduce the presenters. Thank you guys so much for being here today.
Well, howdy and welcome everyone. Dr. Gilson and I thank you for joining us today and for taking some time to learn about this topic or further your insight on this topic. We know that time is precious, and so we view it as a great gift that you're sharing your time with us today. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Gilson so that she can introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm participating virtually, so you'll see me on your screen. My name is Dr. Carly Gilson. I am an assistant professor of special education. I'm in the Department of Educational Psychology and a proud affiliated faculty member of the Center on Disability and Development. I'm also the founder and the faculty director of the Aggie Achieve program, which I'll be telling you more about a little bit later on. But my research interests focus on preparing young adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities for success and inclusive and integrated opportunities after high school. And my two main pillars of research focus on integrated competitive employment and inclusive post-secondary education. So I'm really excited to be with you today and to see so many of you on this call who are coming to us from across the state and from across our university. So as Dr. Montague said, thank you so much for being with us today. We're excited to share more.
Okay, and to introduce myself a little bit, I am Dr. Marcia Montague. I am a clinical assistant professor at Texas A&M University in the Division of Special Education in our Department of Educational Psychology. Like Dr. Gilson, transition is an area of interest and focus for me. Also working with families, family involvement and empowerment for students with disabilities, for low-income families and families who typically are not accessing post-secondary education. They're having trouble hearing. Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to just hold it because I feel like I'm leaning forward. Is that better? Okay, thank you, Dr. Gilson. So I am director of the Aggie Homework Helpline, which is a free tutoring service throughout the state of Texas. If you're interested in exploring that more, just do a quick Google search for Aggie Homework Helpline and you'll land on our website, and you can sign up your child or share with your families, your students' families, so that they can receive that service. Additionally, I'm co-director of our Heart of Texas Gear Up, which is a program that's working specifically with Bryan ISD and Hearn ISD, helping students who are currently in 8th grade progress through high school and then on into secondary education. So today our topic is supporting all students as they seek to obtain a post-secondary education. Dr. Gilson is going to be able to highlight the Aggie Achieve program and really focus in on that as a spotlight. At the beginning of our session, however, we're going to talk just more broadly about some statistics related to transition, as well as some supports. And so that's what I'm going to be contributing to our talk today. As Dr. Orsag said in the introduction, many students and families hope for or view post-secondary education as a goal, and students are reporting that, right? More than 80% of high school students with disabilities list post-secondary education as a goal, but far fewer actually fulfill that goal. In the United States, only about 60% of students with disabilities enroll, as compared with 67% as a whole. And then we lose some of those students because they don't actually graduate. In Texas, our numbers are, even a little more troubling. So we have approximately 90% of Texans aged 25 and up have graduated from college. But when we compare that with students with disabilities or individuals with disabilities, just about 10% of individuals graduate with a four-year college degree. Only 21% of students with disabilities were enrolled in higher education within 1 year after leaving high school, and that's coming from the Texas Education Agency. Additionally, we see that all too many young adults and adults with disabilities in Texas are unemployed, right? And so our work is important in that we're supporting students to be prepared for life after high school, both employment and accessing education. So I know in the room we have many special educators. We have many of you who are very familiar with aspects of IDEA law, but I also know that we have others who may not be as comfortable and confident with that. And so wanted to talk just a little bit about what the law does provide for related to supporting students as they transition. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, includes transition planning as a requirement. And this is a requirement that says in the child's IEP, or individualized education plan, we must discuss and put a plan in place that's going to help facilitate that child's movement from school to post-school activities. Those post-school activities can be things like attending higher education, right? College in its many forms. It can also be employment and how we support a child to obtain and maintain employment after graduation. We can also consider things such as self-advocacy, independent living skills, and recreation and leisure, all as part of that transition plan. Transition planning in the United States must start before the students turn 16. In Texas, we start at age 14 with thinking about transition planning. Transition planning is individualized, just like the individualized education plan that every student with a disability has. The transition plan also is individualized. It must be based on that student's strengths, preferences, and interests. So that's a little different than if we're thinking about, where we're developing IEP goals and the areas of need, right? Here we're thinking about what are that child's interests and preferences so that we can really build a plan to help them become successful adults with employment opportunities and continuing education. And the last bullet there says, through transition planning, we want to include opportunities, activities that allow that child to develop, functional skills for work and for community life. So today we're really focusing on that college aspect or continuing education aspect of transition planning. So I want you to just think for a moment, and if you're in the Zoom room, you can type in the chat if you don't mind. So what does college mean to you? When you hear that, when you're thinking about your student, your child, your students in your classroom going to college, what does that mean to you? How would you define it to another professional, a student, a family member? Let me give you a moment to type in the chat. Okay, thank you, Laura. So the next step after graduation for those that are wanting to pursue a degree. Okay, awesome. Other ideas? What does college mean to you? Okay, in the face-to-face audience, we have someone that said additional formal learning. Okay. Elizabeth says advanced skills and experiences that help with employment and help with independent living. Great. Taking your knowledge further into a career, college experience, learning new skills. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing there. Oops, there we go. Thank you for sharing for a moment there. Many times across my career, I've come into contact with many families who have the mindset that college is Texas A&M University or the University of Houston or University of Texas, wherever, right? It's a four-year university that for them, they see as this scary place that their child's not quite ready for. And while that can be the fact that college is, going to college means going to a four-year university, that's not all, right? If we're thinking about formal opportunities for continuing education, we want to expand our concept of what going to college means so that when we're working with kids, we can present them with, a plethora of ideas, of opportunities. When we're transition planning and it's individualized, education after high school doesn't mean one thing for all students. It can definitely be individualized. And so as educators, for those of you in the room who are educators, on our campuses, we have the responsibility, I believe, to help expand that conception of college. What does college mean to us? And helping students and families and other educators as well develop that culture of college knowledge where we're infusing that content, the terminology that scares so many and kind of turns individuals away. We have the responsibility to ensure clear transition goals and objectives that are aligned to that child's interests and to their strengths. And we need to develop awareness of supports that are available. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that aspect as we continue on. So here in Texas, for example, college or additional post-secondary education doesn't just mean a four-year university degree. As I mentioned before, we could consider a two-year community college, going to college, right? Continuing our education. There are two-year university or colleges throughout Texas and the United States, and definitely are a viable resource for many students. There are technical or trade schools. Places like Texas State Technical College, where students can earn a pilot's license, or they can earn, culinary arts certificates or HVAC certification, things of that nature. Additionally, certificate programs that, for example, at Blinn College in their workforce section, these aren't necessarily academic programs, but they're programs that prepare individuals to enter the workplace with a particular skill set that makes them competitive for employment. There are college access programs where individuals are able to perhaps audit classes or participate in inclusive opportunities. There's also the Gary Job Corps. Many times we don't think of that as continuing education, but for some of our students with disabilities, it's an opportunity to continue education after high school, and even additional independent living skills training at Centers for Independent Living, our CILs throughout the state. In the Brazos Valley, we have the Brazos Valley Center for Independent Living. In San Antonio, there's SAILs, and there's others throughout Texas. At those Centers for Independent Living, they may have classes on cooking or classes on healthy living, helping to navigate their town with public transportation and others. thinkcollege.net is a phenomenal resource throughout the United States. It provides great information on inclusive programs for our students with disabilities. We have in Texas presently 15 inclusive programs. I couldn't fit them all on one slide, but you'll see, for example, there are programs in Alvin and Austin, Arlington, El Paso, Canyon, Texas, Conroe, and here in College Station at Texas A&M University, we have a couple of programs, the PATHS program and then Aggie Achieve, which Dr. Gilson will talk about. With the PATHS program, individuals with and without disabilities can come and learn to be prepared to work as direct support professionals and in other areas. But these, so I'm going to go back to this slide. So if we're thinking about where do these programs fall, it could be that they're part of a two-year community college degree. It could be that they're a certificate program, or it could be that they're a college access program, depending on the way that program is developed. But thinkcollege.net, I encourage you to go check that out if you have not looked at that resource thus far. Okay, so programs are available, right? We can expand our concept of what college looks like, or what education opportunities are for individuals with disabilities beyond high school. But we also need to know that supports are available, right? While students are in public school or pre-K through 12th grade, they're receiving services, special education services through IDEA, right? Through the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Once they graduate from high school, IDEA no longer governs the types of supports that they can receive. So if a student was receiving modifications to their instruction, if they were receiving accommodations, those things come to an end when a student graduates. However, as soon as IDEA ends, right, we still have supports, and that comes through Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act and also the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA. So individuals who have disabilities who are enrolled in post-secondary education programs can receive accommodations. And so that doesn't mean that we can change the curriculum of what they're learning in their courses, but they have the opportunity to receive accommodations that will support them with their disability. For example, if we have a student who has anxiety and really struggles with testing in high pressure environments, and is bothered by other students around them and that kind of thing, an accommodation that they could request through the Disability Services Office at their institution of higher education could be to test in a reduced distraction environment. So they can maybe go and test in the Disability Services Office away from the distractions. So I believe that the slides are going to be posted on the website, and there's a number of hyperlinks embedded in here, but one that I embedded was the Disability Services Office, and this is from a community college in the San Antonio area as an example, but it would take you to a disability service office that explains the types of accommodations that can be provided, right? So it's things like note-taking assistance, perhaps, extended time on tests, reduced distraction testing environment, and things of that nature. At Texas A&M University, our Disability Resources Office does a great job with putting out the statistics of who's receiving services. And I have it hyperlinked here, but we have increased over time, drastically increased in the number of individuals that we're serving who have disabilities and are receiving accommodations for their education. With ADA and with Section 504, we're seeking equitable access to the education, right? Equitable access. So if a student has a visual impairment, for example, we have to put in place accommodations that's going to allow that individual to access their text, their articles, just like any other student would. In addition to accommodations, individuals can access financial supports, right? So I want you to type in the chat or speak out loud and share what are some of the resources that you're aware of that are available to support students financially with post-secondary education. Okay, Texas Workforce Commission, the GI Bill. Thank you for that. Any other ideas? Okay, well, let's talk about it so that we had a couple of ideas. So all students in the United States are eligible to apply for grants and loans through the FAFSA. So this is the free application for federal student aid. It is a free application. Don't be tricked and pay the $50 on the fake website that'll try to catch you. So it is FAFSA it's either going to have a .ed or .gov website. And this allows students to access need-based aid, right? Need-based aid. There's also the TASFA, and that's Texas specific. This is for individuals in our state who are not US citizens, but still can access aid. And so if you have a student that you're working with who, for example, doesn't have a social security number, they're still able to apply for aid in Texas, and that's through a paper form called the TASFA. Someone mentioned Texas Workforce Commission and rehabilitative services. Absolutely. That is a great resource for our individuals with disabilities. They can work with a vocational rehabilitation counselor, develop a goal and plans, and have access to financial supports, perhaps, for that individual. The FAFSA and TAFSA are for all students, and rehabilitation services that's specific to individuals with disabilities. We also have Workforce Solutions, the youth services program through WIOA. That's another resource. And again, these are both hyperlinked in these slides so that you can take a look. There are Workforce Commission offices and Workforce Solutions offices throughout Texas. If you have a child with a disability who is soon, within the next 2 or 3 years, perhaps going to be pursuing post-secondary education, I encourage you to reach out to the Workforce Solutions office, to a vocational rehabilitation specialist to get their supports and get your child on their radar. In addition, just like all students, right, there are opportunities for scholarships, both at the university that they're attending or the college that they're attending, and maybe from their own local school district or from businesses that you're affiliated with. There are loans, and then there are work study programs where students can work while they're going to college, and part of their financial aid package pays for their employment. Yes. Yeah, so the question was, if a student has guardianship, what kind of resources will be impacted there? That's a really good question, and I've not explored that as much. I am imagining that vocational rehabilitation services will not be impacted by that. Students should still be able to apply for the FAFSA and all of those types of things, scholarships certainly. Dr. Gilson, do you have anything to add with that?
I'll just say that for some programs, students being their own guardian is a requirement for some of the college-based programs, including Aggie Achieve. So that would just be something to look for if it's listed on one of their eligibility requirements, that students have to be their own guardians in order to participate in the program. But as far as financial access, I don't think that there's any impact just based on guardianship.
Yeah, so perhaps programmatic limitations depending on the program that they're applying to, but access to the funds that we've been talking about, I don't believe should be impacted through that. But that is a good question that I've not been asked before or explored before. So in addition to, expanding our concept of what college can be, what it can look like, encouraging students and families to consider these options, knowing the resources that are available. We also want to try to help prepare our students so that they're ready for life after high school. And so if we need to provide development opportunities, work-based learning experiences, that's really, really helpful, allowing students to job shadow or volunteer, engage in internships, and those types of things really will help them prepare for life after high school. We want to assess their readiness to manage college level work and that independent living that comes with going to college. And we also want to emphasize their development and preparation for career readiness. And so I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Gilson, who's going to spotlight on the Aggie Achieve program.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Montague. Howdy, everyone. So we're going to talk about one of the programs that you can find out more on Think College. So Think College is a resource that is specifically to support students with intellectual and developmental disabilities in accessing higher education. And Aggie Achieve is one of the programs that is part of this national network of programs across the country that offers an inclusive college experience and education, certificate-based education for students with intellectual disabilities. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what Aggie Achieve is, and then I'll share some of the criteria that we have for the program, a little bit about what the program looks like, and then I'll end by just talking about what are some general skills that you can prepare either your son or daughter or your students or whatever capacity you're thinking about this. What are some things that you can start working on now with them that would prepare them for higher education, whether it's Aggie Achieve specifically or just broadly thinking about other college opportunities. So Aggie Achieve is really two equally important parts comprise our mission. The first is it is intended to provide an inclusive and immersive college education. And inclusive meaning that the students in Aggie Achieve have access to all aspects of undergraduate campus life at Texas A&M. So they are considered students first. And even in the name, Aggie Achieve, they're Aggies first before anything else. So they have the status of being non-degree seeking students, but that means that they can still live on campus. They can enroll in Texas A&M coursework. They pay the student fees to have access to the dining services, instructional technology, library services, all of the things that any other Texas A&M student has. And it's also an immersive experience. So inclusion is often seen as talking about physical proximity to where things are happening. And we deepen that by talking about immersion, so that it's not enough to just have students with disabilities physically included, proximal to where things are happening. A lot of general education classrooms might say they're inclusive, but they have all of the students with disabilities like grouped off to the side. So immersive, meaning that the Aggie Achieve students really have ownership in their campus life. They are not just passive participants watching someone else's college experience happen, but they have their own, and they take ownership in selecting the courses they take, the organizations that they join, the activities they want to go to, and that they are day-to-day immersed in all of those opportunities. And the second pillar is equally important, is that it's a very outcomes-driven program. So the goal of Aggie Achieve is that all of our students will graduate with having competitive integrated employment in the community. And that means that they are working in jobs that offer the same opportunities, the same wages, the same responsibilities and opportunities for advancement as any other job for someone without a disability. So it's in a career of their choice and is something that is aligned with their goals, their interests, and their needs. Students in Aggie Achieve can be enrolled for up to 4 years. It is designed to be a 4-year program. But we've just started doing an annual evaluation, and at the end of each year, students will be evaluated to determine if they meet the requirements for the following year. So up to 4 years, but the goal is that all of our students will complete 4 years. And the way the 4 years are structured is that the first 2 years are designed to introduce students to college. They live on campus. They learn about time management skills, study skills. They learn a lot about healthy relationships, friendships, romantic relationships, how to navigate higher education environments. We talk a lot about self-advocacy, as Dr. Montague said. Accommodations and access to accommodations and supports looks very different in high school. And a lot of that is requires the ownership of the student with a disability to advocate for themselves. Unlike in special education, IDEA, covered services in K-12, where it's if a student meets IDEA requirements, then they are automatically provided with those services. So in college, it is up to the student to advocate for that on their own. So we talk a lot about self-advocacy and identity of having a disability, and how that impacts who they are, and how it's, also has nothing to do with other unique aspects of their identity. So we have a lot of those great conversations. And then in the last 2 years, they're spending a lot more time focused on employment and independent living and community skills. So I'll talk more about this later, but we gradually introduce them to employment opportunities. And by the time that they are in the last 2 years, they're spending the majority of their time in off-campus internship settings. So I want to pause here and ask you just what comes to mind when you think of inclusive higher education. And so Dr. Montague asked, what comes to mind when you think of college? Now I want you to think about the inclusive side of it. What is it? What would make college inclusive? I'll give you a couple minutes to either answer in the chat, or if you're in the room, you can also just speak up as well. So while you are writing that, I saw a question in the chat that said, what kind of majors are offered? It's all the students receive a certificate of interdisciplinary studies. So there are not specific majors. However, there are lots of different concentration areas that are related to education, psychology, animal science. We of course work in English composition, arts and history, entomology, all different types of pathways that students can explore. Okay, so I saw someone in the chat put incorporating students with disabilities into general academic courses. Thanks, Hannah. Social inclusion, great. Looking at college with a different perspective, a perspective that includes all. I love that, thank you. Thank you to everyone who responded. So a big theme that I'm seeing here is that inclusion is not a one size fits all. And really what inclusion means is that students of all ability level, other identifying factors, including race, ethnicity, gender identity, interest level, faith-based background, whatever it might be that defines who they are as a person is celebrated and welcomed and embraced in the atmosphere. That's inclusion. And what that means is that in college, that there is space and there's an opportunity to not just acknowledge all of the diverse identities that may enroll in college, but also celebrating them. So thank you. Okay, so if Aggie Chief students complete all 4 years, then they receive a certificate of interdisciplinary studies that comes from Texas A&M University. And that certificate, as I said earlier, so it's not a degree, it's not the same thing as an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree. Want to be really upfront about that, because when we do have students who apply to Aggie Achieve, and if we think that this is somebody who can go on to get an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree or any of the other options that Dr. Montague talked about, then we often do recommend that, because we acknowledge that a bachelor's degree really is the gold standard of in many of the employment opportunities that adults are seeking. And however, it is not the best choice for everybody. So if someone can go get a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree, then we encourage them to do that. However, we're really targeting students for whom otherwise other post-secondary pathways would probably not be a good option. And so in this case, the certificate is a credential that is recognized by many employers, and thanks to the advocacy work of Think College and other groups that support people with IDD, more and more of these post-secondary credentials are seen as industry acknowledged. And so if someone applies for a job and they have one of these credentials on their resume, then it really is seen to be an asset.
Dr. Gilson, we have a question in the audience here.
Sure.
Yeah. So the question in the audience, I'll try to paraphrase there, is, there's a delicate balance between acknowledging that students are included, but there is this different track to where they're not receiving the 4-year degree, they're receiving a certificate. So if you can kind of talk about your thoughts on that. Does that capture what you were asking? Okay.
Yeah, I think we can't ignore that the Aggie Achieve students are going to be on a different track. And, as much as the program is designed to be inclusive, there are some inherent limitations that prevent it from being fully inclusive, same experience. And that's, I think, just an indicator of, yes, we have a ways to go in this field, but also that there are some natural or currently existing components of the university structure that do not meet the needs of our students. So offering opportunities to receive additional modifications or supports provides that. I'm not sure if I answered the question though. So is it just my thoughts on whether or not that's truly inclusive, or whether?
Thank you, Dr. Gilson.
Is that good? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, thanks for that question. It's a good question. So some new changes this year that we're starting just this year is that Aggie Achieve students will now be reviewed annually each year. And then if they are determined not to meet the eligibility requirements for the following year, so the like year 1 going into year 2, year 2 going into year 3, then they will still receive what we're calling a micro credential. And we're in the process of developing what this is going to look like. So given our kind of the natural focus points of each year, we envision that year 1 is probably going to focus a lot on academics and college life. Year 2 is going to focus on independent living, because that's getting them ready to move off campus in years 3 and 4. And then years 3 and 4 or year 3 might focus on social skills and community navigation. And then year 4 is of course going to focus on employment to get them ready for integrated employment opportunities. So what our hope then is that students will be able to walk out not only with the certificate, but also on their resume, these micro credentials that show that they have expertise and they've met the qualifications for being certified in each of these areas as well. So Aggie Achieve is a comprehensive transition program, which is a designation from the U.S. Department of Education. And it was the first in Texas, but now there are several more that have recently joined. So that's very exciting. So it really has 2 direct implications. The first is a practical implication that because we have this designation, that our students can apply for federal financial aid. So they fill out the FAFSA, just as Dr. Montague talked about, just like any other student. And if they have need-based eligibility, then they can receive the Pell Grant, they can receive work study. Many of our students do have internships that are related to work study. They can also receive supplemental educational opportunity grants as well. So that's really a huge benefit, and really expands the access for applicants into Aggie Achieve, because many of these programs, including Aggie Achieve, are very expensive and often are not covered by many of the state supported access to tuition. So somebody talked about like the GI Bill in the chat, and in Texas, there's the Hazelwood Act, I believe it's called, that would be for veterans and veterans families. Aggie Achieve students are not eligible for that. There's a similar one for foster care students who are in the foster care system. Aggie Achieve students are not eligible for that. And that's going to be state specific, but in Texas right now, they have not recognized yet these programs as being the same pathway as other forms of higher education. So as such, they're not eligible for those state-based aid. So having federal opportunities really does open doors to expand access to these programs, which can be prohibitively expensive for many students and their families. And then in addition to that, it's not on that slide, but in addition to that, we also have several thousands of dollars in scholarships that we award each year to students that are based on financial need as well. So Aggie Achieve uses a process called person-centered planning. And if you're familiar with the IEP process in special education, it's similar to that, except that it really is true to the name. It puts the person or the student in the center of the decision-making. A lot of times the IEP process is viewed to be very passive, as something that the students don't really even know it's happening, or don't participate until they're legally required. And even when they're legally required, they might only come to the meeting for 5 minutes. Here in person-centered planning, the student is taking ownership of all of their goals. They are leading the meeting, they're leading the process. They get to decide who attends their meetings and who, what their focus areas are and their goals are for each semester. So we have a programmatic program of study that each student follows, but within that, what each certificate comprises looks totally different. So that's why we don't have majors, as someone asked about. Rather, we really encourage our students to take a variety of classes and have a variety of internship experiences and social experiences that as they matriculate more into the program, they spend more time here. They often develop a more nuanced, sharper focus on what it is that they want to study and what their career goals are. But at the beginning, it's really based on their experiences and their interests. And so the student takes ownership in every single aspect of that process. And it's really cool to see that ownership transfer from the school or the parent, as it was in the IEP process, to now the student has full ownership. And sometimes we have to remind them to invite their parents to the meetings because they forget, like, oh yeah, I should invite them, because now they have so many more people in their circle of support in college, where they might have I've seen professors on the meeting, instructors, I've seen department heads come to the meeting because they're just strong advocates of the program and somehow got to know our students, which is super cool. A lot of their peer mentors attend the meeting. So it's a lot, it removes a lot of the legal compliance of IEPs, but really maintains the integrity of the individualized process and puts the student at the center of that. Each semester, Aggie Achieve students enroll in one academic course at Texas A&M. This is not we don't have access to the full course catalog, so it has to be a course that has gone through the curricular approval process. Right now, we have about 20 courses on that list. They range from educational psychology to entomology, theater history, animal science. We have several English classes, English composition, a novels class, fairy tales class. And a lot of these have started based on either the instructor approaches us and says, I want to offer my course to Aggie Achieve students, or equally often is that a student is interested in a course and we reach out to the instructor and say, hey, is it possible for a student to take this class? So for those of you on this call who work at A&M or affiliated with people at A&M, if you know people who would be great instructors, definitely let them know about this opportunity. It's a way to gain a high impact learning practice. And also it is a way for many professors have come to us and said, it really changed the way I teach. And it has made me a better teacher in having Aggie Achieve students in the class because they're thinking in a different way. All of the students follow a modified syllabus. And so because of that, they have different expectations for the courses. And so these are 0 credit courses. So although they might enroll in a educational psychology class, which is typically a 3 credit class, they enroll for 0 credit pass fail rather than receiving a letter grade. And that's because they often have very different expectations. So if the expectation for the course, the capstone project, is to write a 30-page paper, well, then our students might show their learning a little bit differently. They might do a PowerPoint instead, or a podcast, or something that still shows the mastery of the content, but allows them to access it in a way that is feasible for them to demonstrate the content mastery. So a big thing to note here then is that these classes cannot transfer over to a community college or to a 4-year degree because they are 0 credit. So in addition to those courses, the students also enroll in one physical education class each semester. At Texas A&M, we have something called PAP, which stands for Physical Education Activity Program. It's currently in the College of Education. And this is one example of just true inclusion. The PAP division has given us like full access to any of the classes that our students want to take. So they take everything from bowling to golf, basketball, fencing, archery, skiing was even one of them, Zumba, boot camp. I mean, everything you could think of, they have they have it, and the Achieve students do enroll in for credit for that class. It's often a 1 credit class, and they often have the same exact requirements and expectations as their peers. And the reason we have that here is because we really want to emphasize wellness, physical, mental health, and overall positive wellness in our students. So many of them come in with limited viewpoints around physical education and what that means, and limited ways to access wellness strategies. So we really encourage them to gain that through the physical education classes, and it's often their favorite part, one of their favorite parts. And then in addition to those courses, we have several courses each semester that rotate that are called seminars, and these are program-specific classes that students can opt into based on need, that are often taught in conjunction with a peer mentor or with a special education graduate student or undergraduate student or program staff. And these classes focus on independent living, employment skills, financial literacy, healthy relationships and sexuality, and community exploration, getting them out into the community to learn about different aspects of Bryan College Station. And employment preparation, as you heard me say earlier, is a huge part of the program. So beginning second semester, first year, our students have internships, and this is just a snapshot of where some of those internships are. Most of them are on campus right now. So we've got several students at the hotel and conference center, transportation services, athletic services, the 12th Man Foundation, the Association of Former Students, the MSC, Chartwells, really all over. And we're just now starting to learn to get more access into the community. So in the bottom left corner there is one of our students at I Heart Mac and Cheese in Century Square last semester. We have another student now who's at the theater in Bryan. So as students get further along in the program, especially right now, we have juniors. Those juniors are thinking about what do they want to be, what do they want to do after they graduate. And so we're really trying to make sure those community placements are very specialized to the type of work they want to do when they leave. Yeah, so that pretty much is just the text of everything I just said. But these are internships. These are credit-bearing classes. So they enroll in them every semester. They are taught by a job coach and our job developer, who is a paid staff member, full-time staff member. And then they also have specific like seminar sessions that might relate to resume building. We just did a mock interview fair where students gain opportunities to practice interviewing skills with employers and people in the community. Saw a question in the chat that said, how many students do you have? Right now, there are 16 students in the program. And I should mention, we're still pretty new. We're only in our 3rd year. So we have freshmen, sophomores, and juniors now. Next year, we'll have seniors. And then we expect to enroll about maximum 10 students in every cohort each year. So when we're running at like full capacity, we'll have somewhere between 30 and 40 students. Okay, so during the last 2 years, we don't have seniors yet, but we do have juniors. So we do see some students venturing off campus for those internships. And then in the final year, starting next year, we'll give students the opportunity, if they want to stay here for their last year, great. But we also really want to support the transition back to their hometown, if that's where they want to go, or really supporting them to what is their life going to look like after they graduate from Texas A&M, because we don't want this to be something they go hang out 4 years and do, and then go back to doing whatever they were doing before they came. So that last year is seen as a transition year. And we just hired a full-time staff member that is going to really support them through that transition process. So they have the option to live in their hometown or live in the city that they want to live in when they graduate. So for some students, they do want to stay in College Station or Bryan, and others want to go back home. So supporting them in whatever decisions they want to make. Hey, independent living. So some pictures, all those pictures right now are in the White Creek apartments. So for the first 2 years, our students live on campus in White Creek Apartments, which is an on-campus residence hall. It's on the west side of Texas A&M. I hesitate to call them dorms because they are not dorms. They're beautiful apartments. And they are, most of our students live in a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, but some live in a 2-bedroom when they get in their sophomore year. Next one. Okay, so Aggie Achieve, all the students have independent living seminars, and we have a graduate assistant who is focused on independent living, and he works with them on skills like cooking and cleaning and daily living, self-care, hygiene, things like that. It is a requirement for our program that all of the students come in being able to do take care of basic daily living needs, but we want to support them to be really independent in all of their needs. Because we do prioritize that. We prioritize applicants that do want to live independently after graduation. So the program is structured to support that. So during the first 2 years, they live on campus. And then during the 3rd year, they have the option, they have to move off campus, but they have the option of either staying in college, they have the option of going into a house or an apartment in College Station. And then during the 4th year, they have the option of staying in College Station or going back home or living elsewhere in Texas, and they'll still receive support from the program. So each year, the expectations are going to change a little bit regarding independent living. So that's part of the evaluation that will determine is to what extent are they ready to move on to that next phase. So each year we're providing less and less support from the program so that by the time that they're in year 4, what their daily life looks like is very similar to what their life outside of the program will look like. So we're kind of easing back, fading those supports strategically. The first year when they're on campus, they have a residential mentor who is a paid staff member of Aggie Achieve, undergraduate student who lives in the apartment with them. And then the 2nd year, they still live in White Creek. They have access to the residential mentor, but they're not in the unit. And then the 3rd year, they're off campus. They have access to independent living seminars. And then the 4th year, they're either off campus locally or they're off campus back home and have more limited access to those independent living supports. So some big distinctions that I want to make and remind you all of, big differences between high school and college. In college, students are no longer eligible for IDEA, and that's a requirement for most programs unless you are looking at dual enrollment programs. So when you're exploring college opportunities, definitely check to see, does it require, like Aggie Achieve requires that all of our students have exited high school, can no longer receive support. However, many of the colleges on Think College, the college programs have partnerships with high schools where the students can still be enrolled by the district, still receiving IDEA services, and then maybe attend college part of the day. So that is an option as well, and sometimes is a preferred option for people who want to have a smoother transition from high school to college. The other thing to keep in mind is that Aggie Achieve, as well as other related programs, often do not provide any formal therapy services. So that includes like speech therapy, physical therapy, behavioral therapy, occupational therapy. There might be academic programs at the university that support pre-service practitioners in those areas. And so informal support might be provided that way. However, it's not guaranteed in the same way that it would be in high school. And then another big difference is access to accommodations and modifications to content. So typically in K-12, that would be part of the IEP. Dr. Montague talked about disability resources at Texas A&M. That is something that a student with a disability has to opt into. And so they have to self-disclose their disability in order to receive those accommodations and assistive technology. So all of our students are registered with disability resources, but that's because they have chosen to opt into that. So if you are a student coming to Texas A&M or most colleges without being a part of a program like Aggie Achieve, then that would be something that you would have to advocate for and opt into receiving. And then lastly, under the FERPA provision, which is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, big difference is that students in post-secondary institutions own their own educational records. And so going back to the guardianship thing that we talked about before, that's why it's so important in Aggie Achieve specifically that they are their own guardians, because Aggie Achieve students and college students every day they consent to so many decisions. And that is part of being in college. And it's very different than high school, where you might be able to call your son or daughter's high school teacher and say, how did my daughter do on her quiz? Or did they show up for class today? They're not going to be able to call us and ask those questions. We can't give out that kind of information. So we encourage the families to communicate directly with their son or daughter and ask them, did you go to class today? Or how did you do on that quiz? Because unless it is a safety concern or a major behavioral concern, then we're not going to be contacting parents to let them know day to day how things are going. Saw some things in the chat, so I'll address some of those questions. How often parents can visit? We don't have any restrictions on that. We do encourage them to not visit every weekend or not go home every weekend. That first semester is a tough transition, for just like it is for any other college student. It's tough on the parents, it's tough on the student. So we do, I think, especially in that time period, try to limit the visits they have back home, because when you're homesick, oftentimes the worst thing you could do is go home, because that's only going to make it harder to come back. So we, especially during that first semester fall, we really try to provide a lot of opportunities for students to get plugged into the campus community, build friendships, adjust to life without their family. That said, we don't have any formal restrictions, so and they're certainly welcome to visit their families as often as they like. And then someone else asked, fourth year is solely working and no class. So they do take a class, just they still take one class each semester, their fourth year as well. If they are attending remotely, then they would take an online class. So they could still be a part of Texas A&M, just in a different way if they are attending, if they're living elsewhere. It seems like for our first group of seniors, we're not going to have anyone doing that, but we do want to make that option available for people in the future. Okay, so I see some really specific questions about Aggie Achieve, and I'm just going to use this opportunity to plug something that's coming up. On Friday, we are having an open house on Aggie Achieve, and I'll put the information in the chat in just a moment. But what I'm giving you today is just a really brief overview of Aggie Achieve. If you want the specific requirements, you want to know about our specific admissions process, then I encourage you to go to the open house, which is also on Zoom. It's this Friday. I believe it's in the afternoon, around 12. I'll get you the information. So if that's what you want to know, then can definitely share that with you. And if you can't make it on Friday, then we always record them and post them on our YouTube page as well.
Dr. Gilson, we have a question here in the audience as well.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So the question here is related to likely the third and fourth year, helping the student prepare for employment after graduating from Aggie term. And so the question was specifically, do you have partnerships with businesses and organizations where you work with them to help them know the student skill set and support needs and things of that nature?
Great question. Great question. Yes. So we are developing those partnerships, and we've got some exciting big corporate partnerships that are coming up, as well as some smaller community-based employers. So a lot of it stems from, what the individual wants. So we don't want to promise like a pipeline of students going into a specific company or anything like that. But we are in the process of developing some cool partnerships with possibly like Cinemark, Toyota, Coca-Cola, and some other places that are based in Texas that have an interest in supporting adults with disabilities. Also in the chat, I just put in a link to our website, which has the eligibility requirements. So someone asked that. I don't have time in the scope of this presentation to go through all of that, but that is on our website. And then also on that same page that I linked to is a webinar and our open house, and it has the information on our open house on Friday. So if you are interested in attending the open house, it's this Friday at noon, and there's a link to register on our website there, the same link I just put in the chat. And Jennifer, your question, how can my child get accepted? We're going to go over all of that at open house. So definitely encourage you to attend if you're interested. Okay, so I want to close with some skills that are needed for post-secondary. So this is not exactly our eligibility requirements, but it's based on eligibility requirements. It's also based on some research that I've done around what are just across the board, some patterns of skills that are needed and some gaps that we see in the current population of students with disabilities in college. So the first one is technology. So, technology is everywhere and it's ubiquitous in our society. And I think that's only been proven to be true in the last 2 years of the pandemic. So basic technology skills are very important. And I don't mean just, having a social media account, but really knowing how to send an email and how to check an email daily and how to discriminate between what is an email that is a personal email addressed to me versus an email that was sent to thousands of people that I don't need to respond to. And also how to send a formal email to a professor versus sending an email to a friend or a family member, and how that type of communication language is very different depending on who is receiving the email. Also, basic skills in texting and calling. For peers, especially, the primary way that college students communicate with one another is through texting, whether that's through like a GroupMe, like a group text app where they communicate everything on these group apps. But it's basically having access to literacy skills that allow them to understand text messaging. We have the basic literacy requirement of a 3rd grade reading comprehension level. And part of the reason for that, even though that is much lower than the content of the textbooks that they're going to be reading in their classes, well, they have accommodations to access that. Many of our students have e-readers to access textbooks. However, for their text messages, they don't have those same accommodations, and they don't peers often communicate purely through text messaging. So knowing how to text appropriately, how to read text, as well as like how to not send too many texts or over text somebody, all of the nuances of technology-based social skills are very, very important. These are great things to start working on early. Every day, our students are saving documents, sending documents, finding Word documents or Google Docs. So having access to know how to use a search engine, know how to save documents, know how to create a PowerPoint. These are all basic technology skills that we're looking for, because these are skills they use every single day in college. Outside of technology, we're also looking for students who can adapt to change in overwhelming environments. So these might be little things like, oh, your class was supposed to start at 3, but now it's starting at 3:30, or you go into the dining hall expecting there to be hamburgers today and they're out of hamburgers. So there is often a lot of unpredictable situations that happen in the college environment, and successful college students need to be able to adapt to that. And during our very first year of the program is when COVID-19 first hit in March of 2020, as we all know, when the world changed. And I was amazed. I was blown away by just how well our students adapted to that. It was hard, just like it was hard for everybody, but because they had these skills in mind, they knew how to adapt to change. They were able to kind of like understand what was going on. Our students went home for spring break, and many of them did not come back to campus until August of that year. So it was a big change. So a lot of things like that happen on a daily basis that students need to be prepared for. We're also looking for red flags related to behavior. So behavioral concerns that we take note of during the application process would be wandering, hiding, stealing, exhibiting violent or aggressive behaviors. So if that's something that the students you're working with now are currently exhibiting, trying to work on that, and even what could be a possible motivating factor for them is to say that, to be college ready, you have to exhibit positive behaviors. You have to be able to sit still for at least 90 minutes in a given class period and things like that to show them what it means to be college ready. Okay, it's also necessary to have basic emergency and safety knowledge. So being able to navigate, Texas A&M is a very large college campus. So being able to navigate a large campus safely, crossing streets, understanding road signs, understanding what to do in an emergency, how to call 911, how to call your emergency contact, going through some basic protocols, what to do when there's a tornado drill, things like that. So that when a student comes, oftentimes, yes, they are with groups, but there's also a lot of unstructured, unsupervised time. And so we do want to see independence in those areas so that if a safety issue occurs, then students know how to react appropriately. Basic knowledge of personal information is a great thing you can start working on now, making sure that your students know their address, their phone number, their date of birth, and how to fill out a formal job application or an application to be a part of a student organization. What's their email address? Those types of things that they might not always have somebody right there to support them in. So having that knowledge really helps. Social skills. This is a big one, tricky one, but social skills are really important at different levels. How to build healthy friendships and romantic relationships, how to understand the difference between a friendship and a romantic relationship. What is it like to collaborate in classroom settings and formal group settings? So having opportunities to work collectively on a project or shared opportunity really helps. Managing unstructured time, that is very important because there is a lot of free time in college. That's just part of, it's less structured than high school. And for many students with disabilities, they are used to being very heavily managed where somebody has an eye on them from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to sleep. And that's just not how it is in college. So giving them more opportunities to manage their unstructured time appropriately. And then lastly is choice making. So this can be small things like going out to a restaurant and selecting the meal that you want to eat, giving them opportunities to do that. Also giving them autonomy and decision-making skills in activities that they want to participate in on the weekends, what hobbies they want to have, how they want to spend their free time, and who they want to spend their free time with. So Think College, I know it's something we've been promoting a lot, but I'll share it again one more time. There is so many great resources on thinkcollege.net. This is just one. This is the link to it, but I think we're going to send out these slides, so don't feel like you need to write this down. But if you go to the resource page, there's several. If you're a parent of a prospective college student, then definitely recommend downloading this, the 20 Powerful Strategies. So many great things that expand on what we've been talking about today, the financial side of it, as well as the independent living, the behavioral side, some really cool practical things that regardless of what age your son or daughter is or what age the students are that you're working with, you can start doing now. So definitely recommend that. And then if you want more information on Aggie Achieve, you can go to our website. We do have a monthly newsletter. We also are pretty active on social media. And as I said earlier, we are having an open house on Friday. So if you have specific questions about Aggie Achieve, definitely recommend attending that. I saw some questions in the chat. How do you educate other students about this program? The most common thing that we do, Tina, is we do open houses. And prior to COVID, we were doing them on campus. We're still doing them virtually for now because we found that that makes it much more accessible to people. So they don't have to drive to campus. But we are also going to some college and transition fairs. We'll be at the Aldine Transition Fair next week. We can't go to every single transition fair that we get invited to, but we try to go when possible so that we can get the word out and tell more students and educators about this. So, oh, and there's the website for Think College again. Definitely, if you get nothing from this from today's presentation, bookmark Think College. It is such a wonderful website. And then these are some more resources for you to bookmark as well to support the college and transition process. So thank you all so much for attending, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have now.
One website I did want to highlight that we've not really spoken a whole lot about today is collegeforalltexans.com. That website has great information about TAFSA versus FAFSA, grant programs within Texas specifically. It helps get the facts and helping families to plan for post-secondary education. So I'd like to open it up to just any questions that you all have.
I saw Tina clarify the question. So she said, I mean, your general students, do you teach about your program, tolerance and understanding buddy system? Good question. So I'm guessing you mean like the general body, student body at Texas A&M. So not in a formal way, but there are plenty of opportunities to learn about Aggie Achieve. So through some of the coursework that one big class I'm thinking of is the Introduction to Special Education class. We have many students who take that class. It's over 200 plus students every semester. And so they learn about Aggie Achieve. They also learn about inclusion and acceptance and tolerance. And then our peer mentor group that I briefly talked about, the Aggie Achieve Mates, they are volunteers who go through a rigorous application process to work with our students and have background checks and learn about, they have a training as well that talks about what their peer relationship should look like and how to exhibit tolerance and understanding.
If you have any other questions, feel free to just unmute and ask away. Or type in the chat, that works too. And I do believe that Dr. Roberts put a link in the chat for the post-seminar survey. If you don't mind taking a few moments to provide some feedback for the Center on Disability and Development and for Dr. Gilson and myself on how this went for you. Okay, well, thank you all for your time this afternoon. We appreciate you coming and participating with us as we talked about college as an opportunity for all students. Thanks so much.
I did see one question that just came through here. Can a child go to a local two-year college and then transfer to Achieve? Yes, technically, although if they receive an associate's degree and have already done that, then Achieve is probably not the best option for them. We do have some students, some applicants who apply to Achieve because they have tried to go to community college and for multiple reasons, it just wasn't the right fit for them. It didn't work out. So they needed a program with more support. And so, yes, we definitely welcome that. And then someone else asked, where's the PowerPoint going to be located? Is that going to be emailed out?
So it will be posted on the Center on Disability and Development, the website, along with a recording of this session.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
And Dr. Roberts put a link in the chat to the webpage that it will be posted on. All right, thank you again. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.